Well, some of the 2020 Democratic candidates are weighing in on the killing of one of Iran's most powerful military leaders, Qassem Soleimani. And as we've been reporting, he was killed in a U.S. drone strike Thursday night in Baghdad. It's a move that could renew the foreign policy debate in the 2020 race. Here's how former Vice President Joe Biden and former Mayor Pete Buttigieg responded to the situation earlier.
This morning, we could be on the brink of a new kind of major conflict in the Middle East. And we'll likely see Iran ramping up its nuclear enrichment in the coming days, putting an extremely dangerous problem that our administration had solved and put on the back burner back on the table. I hope the administration, I pray the administration has thought through the second and third order consequences of what they have chosen. American lives and global stability are at risk.
It's also the case that if we have learned nothing else from the Middle East in the last 20 years, it's that taking out a bad guy is not a good idea unless you are ready for what comes next. But one thing I am certain of right now is this. This must not be the beginning of another endless war.
For more on this, I want to bring in our CBSN political reporter, Caitlin Huey-Burns. So, Caitlin, Senator Sanders condemned President Trump's, he actually called it assassination, pretty sort of the strongest words we've seen from any 2020 candidate. And he didn't waste time to say that he voted against the Iraq war, something that Joe Biden did not vote for. How do you think this is going to play into 2020?
Well, foreign policy has largely been on the back burner in this race. Instead, voters have been mostly concerned about who can take on Donald Trump, as well as on issues of healthcare and the economy. Now, this certainly elevates foreign policy as a top issue, at least on the campaign trail for the short term, as these candidates are responding to it and as voters start to weigh in. And I think with Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, you see a very clear contrast, a kind of line drawn in the sand between these two candidates. We had seen Bernie Sanders in recent days, and especially in an interview in the Washington Post just yesterday before news of these attacks came out, going after Joe Biden and his vote for the Iraq war. This has been something that Bernie Sanders has been talking a lot about. And if you look at Bernie Sanders' campaign as one that wants to change foreign policy, change the U.S. intervention abroad, something that Donald Trump campaigned on not too long ago, bringing troops back, that is one way to go. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has been campaigning as someone who can do kind of cleanup duty, so to speak, who can kind of go in on day one, take command, and reverse or clean up, in his words, a lot of what the Trump administration has done. So you heard from Joe Biden and other candidates talk about this killing as justified in some way, saying that this is a person who was a terrorist, who had blood on his hands, but they're very critical of the way in which Donald Trump is going about this. Joe Biden, too, because of his service in the Obama administration, has been arguing that he has that foreign policy experience. He also was the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee when he was in the Senate. Bernie Sanders taking a different approach. It's interesting to see just in the last hour, though, we've seen Elizabeth Warren really ramp up her rhetoric, also calling this an assassination, which is echoing Bernie's words.
You know, Senator Amy Klobuchar has attacked Pete Buttigieg for his lack of experience in this field, even though he has served in the military. How do you think that's going to play out? Will that sort of hold?
Well, it was interesting to hear from Buttigieg because he is the only, when you look at the top contenders in this field and those who have been on the debate stage, he's the only veteran on that stage. And so he has been using that as a credential, so to speak, for this commander-in-chief role, which is taking on new prominence in this campaign. So you heard him say there that people need to kind of take lessons from the past years in war. And what I'm really interested to see is how this is playing among different voters in the electorate, those who may be more drawn to Joe Biden and a sense of reestablishing some stability. Those younger voters who, those 18-year-old voters who, you know, might have been born after 9/11 and have seen war really their entire lives. So I'm interested to see kind of how this plays out in different parts of the electorate and how these candidates are talking about it. Because up until now, we haven't really seen a clear contrast between them and Donald Trump on foreign policy. They've talked about endless wars. They've talked about drawing down troops. They've really disagreed with the president on rhetoric, but not entirely on substance. So this could be a game changer in that regard.
You were mentioning how reaction is coming in quickly from candidates. It's changing all the time. I want to play for you Senator Bernie Sanders just a short time ago in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
The United States has lost some 4,500 brave men and women fighting in Iraq. Tens of thousands have been wounded. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have been killed, and trillions of dollars have been spent on that war. The result? Today, we have massive unrest in that country. We have corruption in that country. We have terrible poverty in that country. And now Iraqis want American troops out.
Caitlin, how important is what Bernie Sanders is saying right now to his base and for his campaign?
Well, it's really a central piece of his campaign. Remember, he has been talking about how he did not vote for the Iraq war. He's been using that really as a way to draw serious contrast with Joe Biden. He has gone after Joe Biden repeatedly over the past several months, but especially in the past few days on this, and says that it's something that he believes, that Bernie Sanders believes, can be used in the general election to differentiate himself, Bernie Sanders, with Donald Trump. Remember, in 2016, there were overlapping bases of support between Bernie Sanders and President Trump. They were talking about bringing troops home. They were talking about de-escalating situations. Now that Trump has changed course, Bernie Sanders is arguing that he has been in the same camp for the entire time. So I would expect this, given that he's giving this speech today, shows or sends a signal that this is something that his campaign is likely to focus on, at least in the coming days, as the responses come in.
Caitlin Huey-Burns. Caitlin, thank you very much.
Thank you.